Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, October 10th, 2024. All right, so the first order of business today, it is our fundraiser. It is fundraising season at antiwar.com. We started on Monday. This is how this site runs. We are entirely reliant on donations from our readers. That's how we're able to do what we do. So if you appreciate this show, if you read antiwar.com and you have the means, please help us out and pitch in what you can. If you go to antiwar.com/donate, you can see the different ways that you could support us. We started on Monday. We've had some donations come in, so I appreciate everyone who has done that so far. And this money is spent very efficiently. It goes to running the site. It basically pays the bills. And we are a nonprofit, so that means you could write the donation off on your taxes. So whatever you give to us does not go to the war machine. So that's always a good way to think of it. So antiwar.com/donate, and please help us out if you can. The first story at the top of antiwar.com today, Biden, Harris, and Netanyahu discuss attacking Iran. So President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Wednesday to discuss Israel's plans to attack Iran in retaliation for the Iranian missile barrage fired at Israel last week. So Israeli officials told Axios that Israel's retaliation would likely involve airstrikes on Iranian military sites, coupled with covert operations similar to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas political leader who was killed in Iran, who was killed in Tehran. One of the reasons why Iran fired these missiles at Israel. So, we have seen the various options just based on reading all the reports. Most of them say that they're going to hit military sites. The other options are energy, infrastructure. And I did see some that say they were considering covert operations as well, but now they're saying airstrikes against military sites and covert operations at the same time. And Israel has a lot of intelligence assets inside Iran. They're able to do a lot of things in that country, as we've, you can see with the Haniyeh assassination. And they've assassinated a lot of people inside Iran over the years, nuclear scientists, members of the IRGC. That wouldn't surprise me if we see some operations like that. So we know from yesterday that NBC News reported that the U.S. is actually considering supporting Israel's attack with direct airstrikes of its own. The U.S. officials who said that said it was more likely that they would provide intelligence support, but the U.S. is considering launching airstrikes against Iran. I mean, man. And look at this conversation. I mean, it's Biden, Netanyahu, and Harris, all discussing the plan to strike Iran. So even if the U.S. doesn't directly join in, this is a completely 100%. This will be a U.S.-supported attack on Iran, and who knows what could happen after that. So the White House readout of the Biden and Harris call with Netanyahu said that Biden, quote, affirmed his ironclad commitment to Israel's security and condemned unequivocally Iran's ballistic missile attack against Israel on October 1st, end quote. So according to Axios, Netanyahu will meet with his security cabinet on Thursday to get approval for military action in Iran, which Israeli officials believe will likely lead to a full-blown war. Iran has vowed that it would respond to any Israeli attack. So Netanyahu's convening the security cabinet on Thursday, and they're expected to kind of finalize their plans to attack Iran. So that means I think after that, it could happen at any moment. And Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, he was supposed to visit the U.S. on Wednesday, but then Netanyahu canceled that trip. Apparently, he wanted to speak with Biden before Gallant went over there, and he also wanted to get these plans approved by the security cabinet before Gallant went to Washington. So speaking of Gallant, he issued a new threat to Iran on Wednesday saying, quote, the Iranian attack was aggressive but inaccurate. In contrast, our attack will be deadly, pinpoint accurate, and most importantly, surprising. They will not know what happened or how it happened. They will just see the results, end quote. So speaking of the Iranian attack, he's saying that it was inaccurate. We do know that they struck some military bases, and Jeremy Lafredo, he's a reporter for the Gray Zone. He's an American reporter for the Gray Zone. He was just arrested by the IDF. He's been in Israel for a while, doing a lot of reports on the ground in Israel and the occupied territories as well, West Bank and East Jerusalem. So he just had this report. He went around and he found some missile impact sites. One of them near one of the Israeli base out in the Negev desert, and then another site in Tel Aviv near the Mossad headquarters. That's one thing. Mossad, the headquarters of Mossad, is in the middle of a very densely populated urban area. You might say that they're using, by Israel's logic, by the U.S.'s logic, that means all of the civilians around the Mossad headquarters are human shields. That is essentially their logic. But anyway, so Jeremy went around to these places, and these are, the Israeli military has been censoring this information. They didn't want journalists reporting on it. And then a few days later, Jeremy gets arrested. I'm recording this Wednesday night. As of this recording, he's still being detained. We'll get more information on it tomorrow, hopefully. But, this is an American journalist arrested by the IDF. And another journalist who was arrested and released, who was arrested with him, said that they were beaten and blindfolded. So this is, how they treat journalists trying to get the truth out there. An American journalist nonetheless. So hopefully he gets out of there. But anyway, I just wanted to mention that while we're talking about this. But you should go watch the report. It's short. It's only 6 minutes, but he packs a lot of information in there. All right, the next one here. The U.S. considers launching airstrikes against Iran. Oh, that's a story from yesterday that I left up. The next one here. Israel kills 45 more Palestinians in Gaza, escalates in the north. Gaza's health ministry said Wednesday that Israeli forces have killed at least 45 Palestinians and wounded 130 in the previous 24-hour period as Israel is working to cleanse northern Gaza of Palestinians. The latest violence brings the ministry's recorded death toll since October 7th, 2023 to 42,010 and the number of wounded to 97,720. So their death toll has exceeded 42,000. I think I had some people listening or watching the show who were new kind of asking me why I trust these numbers from the health ministry in Gaza. And well, as I always mention, they're actually, likely a vast undercount because they don't include Palestinians who are missing and buried under the rubble, and they don't include Palestinians who have died of starvation or disease or things like that. But the reason why I go over them every day is because I think it's important to track the human toll, just get some sense of the violence every day that's being committed with our tax dollars. And the health ministry does have a track record in previous conflicts. They were accurate. You go back to the 2014 war. Israel did its own assessment. The UN did its own assessment, and they all lined up with the numbers from Gaza's health ministry. Last year, back in, I want to say maybe November 2023, when Israel was killing hundreds of people every day, the U.S. State Department admitted, after Biden cast doubt on the death toll, the U.S. State Department admitted, the number is actually probably higher than what the health ministry is reporting. There was a report in Israeli media that the Israeli military actually used the numbers to figure out how many people they were killing. So there's a lot of reason to think that these numbers, and they also released the names of 34,000 people that they've identified. So, it's not like I'm just taking it at face value, whatever they say. It's also just a matter of, I track the violence every day. I look through all the pictures from the news agencies. These numbers are not, again, if you look at the destruction in Gaza, these numbers seem like an undercount. So it's not like they're saying ridiculous things here. So anyway, that was kind of a long tangent about that. But so on Wednesday, the Israeli military escalated operations in northern Gaza, where it is carrying out an ethnic cleansing campaign based on an outline known as the General's Plan. On Sunday, the Israeli military ordered the estimated 300,000 Palestinians living in North Gaza to leave. So they're focusing on Jabalia, the refugee camp, and the Israeli military's Arabic language spokesman issued a fresh evacuation order for the camp on Monday. He told them, head to the south, head to southern Gaza. That means it's south of the Netzarim corridor, which is that strip of land that the IDF has bulldozed everything and they've established military bases. So once they go south of there, they can't go back. And the Palestinians know that there's no real safe place. They've been bombing the so-called safe zone that they're trying to send them to. And there's also CNN reported on Tuesday that Palestinians who were trying to leave Jabalia were being fired at by drones. This one eyewitness said that drones were firing at everyone passing by on the road, and 3 people were shot right in front of him, including a little girl who was shot in the neck. So Israel has also ordered the evacuation of all patients and medical staff from 3 hospitals in northern Gaza. So this is a picture of Palestinians leaving Jabalia on, I believe, Tuesday. So the next one here, North Gaza hospital director defies Israeli evacuation order. This article is from Dropsite News. The director of the besieged Kamal Adwan hospital in northern Gaza is refusing Israeli orders to shut the hospital and evacuate. He said, quote, as long as there are patients, I won't leave. I've been here since the genocide started, and I am determined to continue helping my people, end quote. So this is Dr. Hassam Abu Safia. He is the director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital. And the story gets into the fact that it looks like they're starting this general's plan in the north. And the Kamal Adwan Hospital is the only one in the area that's partially functioning, that specializes in treating babies and providing dialysis. There are some 60 patients remaining in the hospital, from newborns to elderly. This is who they're telling to evacuate. They're telling newborn babies to evacuate. And we know at one point in this, one of the most horrific stories that's come out of Gaza was they evacuated a hospital. The director or some doctor there told the IDF that there's newborn babies, premature babies in incubators, and the IDF left them there. And then when they left the hospital and people went back, they found the bodies of the newborn the newborn babies decomposing. So, this is what they're dealing with here. So he's saying he's not going to leave. All right, so the next one here, Palestinian-American cardiologist loses 175 family members in Gaza. This article is from Al Arabiya, and this is Dr. Tariq Haddad. He is a cardiologist who works in Virginia, very close to Washington, D.C., and he believes that, he knows around 175 of his members of his extended family have been killed by Israel in Gaza within the past 12 months. 175. And he talks about one of his nephews who survived an airstrike. He ended up dying, but he was the only one who survived. So he said, quote, Hamza was barely 10 years old. He's the only one of his family who survived. He woke up in a hospital with an amputation and with the news that his parents, his uncles, and his other uncle, his grandparents, every single member of his family had been killed. And then he himself succumbed to the trauma from his amputation, end quote. So apparently he was trying to meet with Antony Blinken. Again, he's a very renowned, well-respected doctor that lives near D.C., but Blinken's office told Haddad that he would only get a 3-minute meeting with Blinken. So what are you going to say in 3 minutes? So Haddad, instead, he said it was unacceptable. He decided to write a letter, a 12-page letter to Antony Blinken, and he never got a response. But this is from the letter. It says, quote, how do I look a person in the eyes for 3 minutes who not only could have prevented the death of my family members and the 15,000 children in Gaza who've been killed, but actively contributed to their suffering and death by providing military munitions from our U.S. military supply to kill my family and destroy their homes, end quote. So just unimaginable for me. I don't have 175 family members that I know, but it's just like, imagine your whole extended family being wiped out like that. The next one here, Israel's footage of airstrikes documents devastating civilian harm. This is from Middle East Eye, and it's based on a big report that Air Wars put out, and you could go watch the video. So basically, they analyzed all of these clips, hundreds of video clips that the Israeli military put out itself of airstrikes in Gaza. And they found, by geolocating them, they found that 17 incidents in which footage released by the Israeli military matched the exact location of where the monitor had documented civilians killed or wounded. In these 17 strikes, more than 400 Palestinian civilians, including more than 200 children, were reportedly killed in those 17 clips, which represents 1% of all footage released in the past year, the organization said in a film about their investigation. So basically, they analyzed the ones that they were able to locate, figure out the location. And they're saying that, the reason why Israel was releasing these is that they wanted to make it seem like it was a precise bombing campaign. And the footage that they release, it's hard to figure out where it is. It's overhead. You can't really see anybody on the ground, and you just see these buildings get blown up. So they figured it out from looking at satellite images and matching with stuff on the ground. But yeah, the Israeli military's own footage was of these massacres of civilians. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes in Lebanon kill 22 in 24 hours. So Lebanon's health ministry said Wednesday that Israeli attacks on Lebanon killed 22 people and wounded 80 in the previous 24-hour period as Israeli strikes continued to pound the country. Strikes on Wednesday included an attack on the southern village of Deir Dejaya, which killed 5 rescue workers. Lebanon's state civil defense agency said they, quote, were killed in an Israeli airstrike that targeted the civil defense center in the village of Deir Dejaya as they were inside on the alert to receive emergency calls, end quote. So Israel has repeatedly targeted Lebanese first responders over the past year. 10 firefighters were killed by Israeli strikes on Monday, bringing the total number of rescue workers that Israel has killed in Lebanon since last October to over 100. And that's out of about 2,000 people that they've killed. I mean, that's a big ratio. And you see this picture here of some rescue workers working in the rubble. Lebanon's health ministry said that the latest violence has brought the total number of people killed in Lebanon since October 8th, 2023 to 2,141. At least 1,323 of them, including over 100 children, have been killed since September 23rd. Then also on Wednesday, Hezbollah fired at least 150 rockets into northern Israel and killed 2 Israeli civilians in the northern town of Kiryat Shmona. The incident marked the first time Israeli civilians were killed by a Hezbollah attack since early August. And during that attack, it was actually an errant Israeli interceptor that struck an Israeli civilian, a student who was up there. So Hezbollah has been able to step up its rocket attacks on Israel despite the massive Israeli bombardment in Lebanon, and invading Israeli troops have faced stiff resistance on the ground. And it's estimated that 15,000 Israeli troops have entered southern Lebanon. And after these claims from the U.S. that they sought a ceasefire in Lebanon, now they're all in. I mean, just basically saying, yeah, we support this. We want, essentially saying that they want some sort of regime change in Lebanon. They want to change to the government. They want Hezbollah out of the parliament, even though people voted for them. So they're all in on this huge assault on Lebanon. All right, so the next one here, horror accounts of Israeli attacks in South Lebanon. This one is from Middle East Eye again. In the small village of Ain al-Delb in southern Lebanon, a doll in a red dress, yearbooks, and tiny slippers lay on top of a mountain of rubble. Other personal belongings are scattered around the remains of a residential building that just over a week ago was flattened in an Israeli strike, burying dozens of men, women, and children under slabs of thick concrete. So just like Gaza. 71 people were killed in this single airstrike, and over 58 were wounded. This is the single deadliest strike on record since Israel and Hezbollah began fighting on October 8th, 2023, the deadliest Israeli strike in Lebanon since then. A funeral for those who died was held on October 1st, where mourners put them to rest in mass graves near the city of Saida. So this is the Mufti, Muslim legal expert of Saida, told Middle East Eye, quote, "The building was full of families who weren't active in any military activities," end quote. He said that, this organization of burials, he heads the organization of burials in the southern city. And according to Islamic practice, the body of the deceased is usually washed, covered with a white cotton shroud, and then prayed over before burial. But Israel's strike on Ain al-Delb left some of the bodies dismembered, making it impossible to perform the Islamic burial rituals, the religious leader said. So just really horrific. And man, that makes me think of, I know there's been a few instances of this. There's been a lot of this in Gaza, but there was one strike recently where people were saying they were basically going around and collecting body parts and putting them in bags and just like giving them to families, saying this is probably your relative, your family member. Go bury this bag of body parts. I mean, man. But so, we're seeing this stuff happen in Lebanon, and that's what Netanyahu is basically saying, that we're going to destroy you like we destroyed Gaza. All right, so the next one here, the U.S. thought the risk of Russia using a nuclear weapon was 50%. So there's a new book from Bob Woodward is coming out, and I don't believe everything Bob Woodward says in his books. But this, I think, has some truth to it based on what was happening around the time. His book, which it's not out yet, but this was, the journalist got copies of it. And the Associated Press reported that it says U.S. intelligence determined in September 2022 that there was a 50% chance of Russia using a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. According to the book titled War, the warnings came in late September 2022, with U.S. intelligence believing Russia could use a nuke if its forces were surrounded in Kherson city in the south there. Russia withdrew from the city not long after in November 2022. The book says that the warning caused alarm within the Biden administration as it moved the chance of Russia using a nuclear weapon from their assessments from 5% or 10% way up to 50%. And it was around this time, if you remember, that President Biden said publicly that the risk of nuclear Armageddon was higher than it had been at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Biden said this at a fundraising event in New York on October 2022, so 2 years ago. Wow. He said, quote, "I don't think there is any such a thing as the ability to easily use a tactical nuclear weapon and not end up with Armageddon. We have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis," end quote. So I remember when he said that, and I tried to put a positive spin on it. I said, well, if he really thinks that, then he's got to de-escalate this thing, right? But no, despite this huge risk of nuclear war, Biden did not alter course on U.S. involvement in the proxy war, which has only escalated since then. The Woodward book says that the U.S. issued several warnings and threats on the potential consequences of what could happen if Russia used a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. Woodward says that Biden told National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, quote, "Get on the line with the Russians, tell them what we will do in response," end quote. And again, this tracks with what we saw happening at the time, and all this stuff I covered at antiwar.com. In September 2022, Sullivan said publicly that Russia would suffer catastrophic consequences if it uses a nuke, and said that the U.S. conveyed that in private conversations. And a few months later, the Wall Street Journal reported that Sullivan had been holding secret talks with Russian officials at that time. The Woodward book says that Biden also sent a message to Putin that there would be catastrophic consequences. But there's been no known contact between Biden and Putin since Russia invaded in February 2022. Biden has refused to talk to him. So if he did tell him that, it was probably through some back channel or something. And the book also says that when Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin spoke with then Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in October 2022, he warned, quote, any use of nuclear weapons on any scale against anybody would be seen by the United States and the world as a world-changing event. There is no scale of nuclear weapons that we could overlook or that the world could overlook, end quote. So the risk of this thing turning nuclear is still very high. I mean, we just saw Putin order changes to the nuclear doctrine, which was a direct response to this talk of the U.S. supporting long-range strikes in Russia amid this, fighting is still going on in Kursk, which was a U.S.-backed invasion of Russia. I mean, again, the fact that Biden was saying nuclear Armageddon is closer than ever before, but, besides getting on the phone with the Russians, which he didn't actually do, but because I remember when this happened, it was like the first time there was any real high-level talk between the U.S. and Russia since the invasion. So besides, issuing their warnings and threats, they didn't change anything. Again, they escalated everything. And this was around the time of the Crimean Bridge was first bombed. So it just shows how completely reckless this whole thing is. And they're just still keeping it going over 2 years later. All right, so the next one here, the French military is preparing for a high-intensity conflict with Russia. I'm sure Putin's shaking in his boots that the French are coming. So the French army is planning to test its ability to fight a high-intensity conflict with Russia during drills in Romania set to take place next year. French troops will participate in the large-scale drills, which are intended to practice a rapid deployment to NATO's eastern flank. The goal is for a French brigade to reach Bucharest in 10 days. So listen to the rhetoric here from the head of the French Army's Land Command for Europe. He referred to Russia as the designated enemy. He said, quote, we used to play war. Now there's a designated enemy, and we train with people with whom we'd actually go to war, end quote. So he's saying basically we used to play around with our military drills, but now we're actually getting ready for a war. And France has a goal to be ready to deploy a battle-ready division of soldiers in 30 days. France and other NATO countries are openly preparing for a future war with Russia. And this is more evidence of that. We talk about this a lot with China, how the U.S. is openly preparing for a war with China. Well, NATO and all these European countries are also doing that, and especially France. I mean, like earlier this year, we had Macron basically calling for NATO troops to be sent to Ukraine. He said that he was finalizing a plan to send French soldiers over there to train Ukrainian troops. And we're not talking about some like unofficial small presence. It would have been like a big deployment. And he was saying he was ready to do it. But it looks like he backed down because Russia kept saying, if you send troops, they're going to be targets. We're going to hit them. So it's just this attitude in Europe. I mean, it's really crazy again. And the narrative is that Russia, once they're done in Ukraine, they're going to roll into Poland. They're going to roll into Eastern Europe. But there's no sign that that's something Putin actually wants to do. What's more, the NATO and Russia could end up in a war if the NATO keeps escalating in Ukraine. That's the real risk here. And that's what Macron seems to want to do. All right, so the last story here, Hungary, one of the few NATO countries that is against all of this craziness. Hungary may delay the G7's $50 billion loan to Ukraine. This article is from Kyle at the Libertarian Institute. The Hungarian government announced that it will seek to prevent a vote on the European Union's participation in a $50 billion Group of Seven loan to Ukraine. The G7 will use frozen Russian funds to pay off the loans. So this is something the G7 wants to do, but the vast majority of Russia's frozen funds are in Europe, so they need the EU to be on board. So if Hungary delays this, then it's going to delay the whole thing. And this is a plan that I think that will really set back any sort of potential for like a de-escalate, kind of a peace deal between Russia and the West, an attempt to repair ties, because once they start really dipping into these frozen Russian central bank funds, Russia's going to want that back. They're not just going to say, oh, you got our money, you took our money, you spent it on a to fund a war against us. You could keep it. Don't worry about it. Because what this would be is they would loan $50 billion, take out a loan for $50 billion, give it to Ukraine, and then pay the loan back with the Russian money. So Hungary is going to delay it after the U.S. election. They're basically saying they think things could change. Hopefully they're right. Hopefully if Trump wins, he goes with what the things he's been saying lately about Ukraine. Or even if if Harris wins, I do think there's even a chance in 2025 that they say, all right, we can't keep this thing going forever. We got war with Iran to focus on. We got to prepare for that big war with China, that they might change course. But maybe that's probably wishful thinking. But Hungary is hoping that things will change after the election. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Ted Snyder. Kamala Harris isn't listening to U.S. intelligence on Iran. One from Paul R. Pillar. Biden is letting Israel trap the U.S. into war with Iran. One from Joanna Gonin. Israeli soldiers who document their crimes know they're safe from prosecution. One from Judge Napolitano. The government compels silence again. And one from Kelly Vlahos. Our spotlight: Congress is MIA on possible U.S. war with Iran. That's one thing I haven't really been talking about. Is kind of the U.S. is considering, the Biden administration is considering bombing Iran. That's completely illegal. The Congress needs to declare war, and obviously that hasn't happened in so long, and then the executive branch has abused its power so much in this department. But it is important to point out that they have no authorization to do this. But anyway, so please go check all of that out. That is it for me for today. Again, if you could help us with our fundraiser, antiwar.com/donate. Other ways you could help us out is by sharing the show. Tell your friends, like and subscribe. All that stuff helps out. Commenting. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.